The Observer newspaper yesterday ran a peculiar story, quite prominently. The headline read, "Only 8% of schools in England have received air monitors promised by the government." The subheader said that survey showed that Minister is falling short of pledge. Shocking. And more than a little eyebrow-raising. Let's look at that article in a little more detail. It read, a Twitter poll by a primary school headteacher revealed last week. It then linked to the Twitter poll in the article. This was the Twitter poll that the entire story rested on. This. I have to say, I absolutely despair. Now, some of you watching will be absolutely shocked that this could be so horrendously misreported. Others will be asking, what's the issue here? Well, one man who can help us understand this all is Adam Drummond, the Associate Director of the strategic insight agency Opinium. Adam, welcome to the programme. Now, lots of people will be looking at that poll that was on Twitter saying, well, 8% of people did say they didn't see a CO2 monitor. Isn't it entirely accurate to therefore say that only 8% of the country has CO2 monitors? What's the problem here?
So the problem is basically exactly the second part of that sentence, which is the gap between 8% of people who answered this poll and 8% of the country. So the main thing to remember with Twitter polls is that we have no idea who's answered them. I think there's ways of looking, but ultimately we have no idea how many people actually have answered that, how many of them are teachers, how many of them work at the same school, how many of them are just random people like you or me who decided to click on it for fun. We have no information about any of the details of who actually answered that poll. The two things basically with any kind of poll that you ever see on the news or anywhere else is basically what have they asked and who have they asked. We can see from that Twitter poll the actual question that was asked by the user who put it up, but we have no information at all about who was asked and who took part, and we have no idea whether or not that is in any way representative of the wider population of teachers. And just quickly, as somebody who has done polling among teachers, it's really difficult and it's quite specialized. And I think it's pretty unlikely that a selection of 1,000 or 1,500 Twitter users is going to be in any way representative of what teachers think across the country.
So the problem here is that polls posted on Twitter, anyone can click on them and answer, and you don't know who those people are. It's entirely self-selecting, and it's not potentially representative. There's an official organisation in the UK called the British Polling Council that regulates the industry. How does it regulate official opinion pollsters to make sure that they're a lot better than just a random poll asking random people on Twitter?
So fundamentally, what the British Polling Council does, it's about enforcing transparency standards. So we as an organisation at Opinion, when we do a poll, and again, not to sort of knock the Observer because they have a proud history of publishing good quality polls by, among others, ourselves. But what British Polling Council organisations sign up to is a set of disclosure standards. So we are obliged to, in order to remain members and in order to say that we're members, we have to publish the full data and tables for any poll that we conduct that enters the public domain. And that has to show you the full text of the questions that were asked, and it has to show you the breakdown demographically of who was asked as well. So you can make sure, and kind of interested members of the public can do the sort of due diligence and hold us to account by looking and making sure that, oh, you've got the right number of men, women, young people, old people, Labour voters, Tory voters. And it can
that's
very,
the
very
crucial
quickly
point, isn't it? It's the weighting. It's the making sure that you have a representative number of men, women, regions, ages, voting intentions. That helps you understand a reflective picture of the country, as opposed to just a random group of people who may well be self-selecting and entirely unrepresentative.
Exactly that. And then the one other crucial point actually is that even if a poll on Twitter does have the right demographic balance, only about 25% of people are on Twitter. So there's ways in which a sample can be completely unrepresentative, which aren't immediately obvious, but which are actually really important. And as everyone's fond of saying, Twitter is not Britain, and Twitter's opinions don't necessarily represent the country as a whole.
Well, what a fantastic point to end on. Twitter is not Britain, and potentially journalists should be a little bit more wary of what goes on Twitter that might not reflect the country at large.